A lot of product teams are excited about AI research, things like synthetic users and AI moderated interviews. A lot of UX professionals are also quietly worried about what might get lost in the process. So if you're feeling that tension between speed and responsibility, stick around because today we're going to talk about AI governance and how to use AI responsibly. So AI, radically lowering the barrier to running research. But faster access does not automatically mean better understanding. So today we're going to talk all about how teams can democratize research, kind of a dirty word. People are afraid of it, but it shouldn't be that scary. We can democratize research without creating AI slop and get insight overload and make sure we're covering those ethical blind spots, which is why I am so excited to have Ned Dwyer on the show today. Ned, welcome
Right.
to Beyond UX Design. I am so excited to have you on. How's it going, man?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
You're obviously an AI. So how did you end up getting into the AI space, specifically around research? And ultimately, how did you come to this realization that we need to do this, but we need to do this ethically and responsibly?
I first got into UX research because I was building my own products and wanted to get in front of customers and learn as quickly as possible to iterate to build something people want. And then joined a much larger company. There was no tools that I could use to go and talk to customers. There was no panel of people I could talk to. There was no past research repository. I was like, there's got to be a better way. And so that's why we built Great Question. You asked like, how do I get into AI? I think AI got into us, right? It kind of got into everyone. You can't escape it. AI has really helped us fast track our mission of democratizing research because it allows us to do things like type in a single prompt about what you're trying to understand about customers. And from that, we'll first mine what do we already know about your audience. Like maybe the best research is actually no research. So first we go through and look at all your past interviews and surveys and studies, insights you've generated, and say, look, maybe we've actually already got an answer to this question. We can then ask you a series of questions to help understand what goal you're trying to get to and automatically produce a study that you can go and run where we've set up the guardrails of incentive amounts and interview guides and things like that. But to your point, AI can do all these things. Does it do them very well? Or does it do it ethically? And I think that's a lot of what we'll talk about today.
The first thing that I think about when I think about AI tools in general, whether it's research or design or anything else, a lot of us designers are thinking, wow, this lets me work really fast and I can still get really great quality at the end. People are afraid, though, that, oh my God, well, what if this AI ends up taking my job? One of the things that I've been seeing is this expectation now to use AI. Well, why aren't you using AI? You need to work faster. You need to work faster. This expectation of speed, but that comes often at a cost. And so there's speed, but is it producing higher quality? If we can go from idea to prototype in just a matter of hours now, what kind of things you've seen, where teams start to confuse speed and progress and quality.
Look, there's certain people in our industry, folks like Greg Bernstein who's at Medium, posted a thing on LinkedIn about basically you've got a couple of choices when you're faced with AI coming in, threatening your job. You can decide to embrace AI and become, I'm not going to be replaced by the person using AI, so let me become the person using AI. You can try to adjust the AI. You can the system a little bit and say, look, we need more ethical AI, we need guardrails in place and AI in only these situations. Go with the flow or work with the system. But you can also exit the system. And Greg Bernstein talks about, I choose to exit. I don't want anything to do with this. I don't want to push this forward because I think this is going to replace our jobs, and I don't think that's a good thing. Steve Jobs talks about the computer is the bicycle for the mind. And now, can you imagine you've got to go and ride to your job across the other side of town, and you could walk there and it's going to take you 3 hours, or you could ride a bike and it's going to take you 20 minutes. What should you do? If you had an employee that was 3 hours late, there was an employee that's 20 minutes late, you'd be like, get on a bicycle. What is wrong with you? Of course. And so I think that's really how I think about this is that, look, there's a degree to which you should go and use these tools, but there are plenty of opportunities in your workflow to go and easily and safely speed up your workflows. I'll give you an example for me. I use AI frequently to go and write product requirements documents. And previously I'd go and write these completely manually by hand. And it would probably take me a week because there's a lot of thought to go into it, pulling data and doing this sort of stuff. Now I can get 80 or 90% of the way there by dictating to the AI to produce a pretty good outline of a PRD. I have an MCP set up that goes and connects to my other tools. It connects to a research repository, a Great Question. It connects to a Linear to see all of our project management tickets and support tickets. It connects to Mixpanel to pull in our quantitative data analytics. And then it's able to help actually produce a much more rounded thing in an hour or two. Now, do I go and publish that and push that to my team? I don't. That would be producing AI slop. It's very easy to drown my team by just publishing what you get from ChatGPT. right? And why would they need me to do that? They can go and query ChatGPT as much as I can. And so really it's that last 20%, which is the most of the work, where I'm editing down to go and find issues or things that are inaccurate, update things with my perception of what's going on in the market. I have to do that because the AI doesn't have all the context that I have as the CEO and the founder and the product manager, because I've been in that meeting with a customer where it wasn't hearing about it. I'm on X looking at other threads about where the industry is going. I know the conversations I have with investors, which are not in the model. I think these are all important to understand because it helps you realize that we're not likely to be replaced by AI anytime soon, unless it goes and has a holistic knowledge of everything around us, all of our context. But it's remiss of you as a professional to try to reject leveraging AI to go and streamline parts of your job, even if it's writing PRDs.
Once you've gotten all that data, more data doesn't always mean better decisions. How do you keep that hubris down? Perhaps is maybe a good way to put it.
I don't think this is a new problem. This is the stuff we all learned in grade school civics classes. If you read a headline or an article in a newspaper, you should be critical about what is this newspaper, this story, Rupert Murdoch trying to push on us? What is the story behind the story? Who are the actors involved that are putting this out there? This is no different, right? It's just a slightly different medium. I admit, hand on heart, I've done this. This is partly why I built Great Question when I was at GoDaddy, because there was a lack of research tooling and a lack of availability of the research team to help me answer my questions. I ran a handful of interviews when I first joined. And then what I learned, I went through my very biased interview that I ran with very leading questions. It was terrible, like in hindsight. I then treated that as fact, and I paraded it around the organization as reality. My small sample size, my leading questions, the customers want this, we should go and build this thing. And I did that because I had no guardrails around me. There was no data governance. No one was able to watch and observe me. And that's all I wanted. I actually craved it at the time. I remember what led me to go and build Great Question. How do we empower researchers and research ops people to have some oversight to help the rogue researchers, the PMs and designers at the front line of the organizations, do higher quality research? And what do I do internally with a Great Question is, I couch people to say, hey, you need to look at the responses from the AI with a critical eye. You need to steelman your arguments. We often use antagonistic models as well. So we take Claude or Opus and ChatGPT and say, cool, review this output and criticize it and tell me how would we know that this is true and factual. We also build a lot into our tooling to do this as well. Things like we're always referencing and citations of how often this has happened, where it's happened, and allowing you to click back and play back, say, a highlight reel or highlight to verify that quote is real and that the question leading into it was not leading. And so, TLDR, you need to encourage people to take a critical eye to any output they've got, trust but verify. And there are a bunch of mechanisms to do that, including citations, including antagonistic models.
Creating thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of insights, and suddenly you've got insight overload. Now I can set up any number of AI moderated tests and surveys and all kinds of things. I'm going to get research fatigue. When you think about the charter, how do you go about thinking about what's too much? What is the thought process there? What kind of questions are you asking the team to get to that insight so that you can document that and say, this is how we will do this?
I said this before, but I think it's all contextual, right? It's like it really matters about your organization, how many users you've got. If you're Facebook, you've got billions of users. And so, look, getting in front of someone that's a Facebook user for something simple is relatively easy. They still need to contact 1 million people. This is a true stat, 1 million people to run one customer interview because the response rates are slow because there's probably a little bit of fatigue and all sorts of issues there. But it is very organization dependent. If you're building for one of our customers is Bloomberg, they work a lot with lawyers and legislators and all sorts of folks. They need to be sensitive about who's being contacted when, because those people are very expensive and their time is very expensive and they need to pay them certain amounts. And so I think it really comes down to figuring out which research in your organization do you think, and which participants and which methodologies do you think still needs to be conducted by a qualified UX researcher, and which do we think we can empower non-researchers to go and run with? Typically how this lands, let me give you a typical scenario, right? Typically how this lands is when we're talking about running research with administrators, there are often very few administrators for a B2B SaaS company or B2C SaaS company, and where it's very expensive and it's strategic questions, we go and use the UX research team. When we're talking about things like continuous discovery interviews with users in your particular area, you're building an invoicing feature, you've got a 1,000 users, we probably want to give the PM a little bit more control to go and actually run that continuous discovery of those people. Or we're talking about prototype testing for designers. We want to give them a pretty free control. We probably also recruit from different places. When you're talking about recruiting lawyers or legislators, really recruiting through account managers, people that have a relationship there, versus when we're recruiting for prototype testing, generally that's more open-ended, using intercepts and things like that. So I'm not sure if I quite answered your question, but
Well, you just answered it like any good UX designer. It depends. What else do you say? But I think the important thing is just thinking about it, right? That's maybe the first step, is to just sitting down and thinking about this. And just, I think the irresponsible thing is to just get a bunch of tools and throw a bunch of data in there.
yes.
And let people do whatever they want without any clear guidance. We don't need to get too deep into the idea of a charter, other than the fact that a charter helps those guardrails. It keeps us in line and makes sure that we don't do those things that we're not supposed to do. And I think more importantly, like holding people accountable when they do. I think that's other really big thing. Any resources around helping teams create that charter, if they don't have it today, it's probably a really good idea they start to put one in place. Are there any resources around for people to do a self-assessment charter, get one started on their own? What would you recommend?
Absolutely. We have one, a great question we've gone and produced. We've worked with a bunch of researchers to help us do this. This isn't just something that we've come up with, and it's not a give us your email address type thing. I'll send you a link and we can put that in the show notes. I think the only other thing I would say is, not only is it about thinking about this, taking a moment to say, what is our charter as an organization, our democratization charter? I think that's really useful. But I think it's also about ensuring that research will happen whether or not you ordain it. Simply saying we don't believe in democratized research isn't sufficient. Because in that world, the PMs and designers are still going to be talking to customers. They're just not going to be telling you about it because they need to get these answers. They want to produce great work. They long for the vast and endless oceans. And so if you're not the one that's providing them with the ship to do that, they will go out on their own. They will build their dinghies and they will go and do that. But because they're not having your oversight, they're going to do a bunch of really bad things to various degrees, and you're not able to go and coach them to be better. And so I think that's ultimately when I think about democratization charters, is it's about acknowledging that the rogue research will exist regardless of what you do. And the question for you is, how much of a role do you want to help play in making it safe, in making it high quality, and making it effective?